Henry Clay was an incredibly influential person in the United States. Especially regarding politics, Henry Clay set many precedents as a member of the House of Representatives, Speaker of the House of Representatives, Senator, and Secretary of State. Clay's policies continued to follow him in prestige far after his death, with Abraham Lincoln saying Clay was, quote, "my beau ideal of a statesman," unquote. And in the 1950s, Clay was named by a panel of historians and Senate leaders as one of the 5 greatest senators of all time. Clay was specifically known for his success as a lawyer, influence on American democracy with his 3 main compromises, his campaign for infrastructure and his American system, and his farming achievements. Henry Clay was born at the Clay homestead in Hanover County, Virginia on April 12, 1777. Clay was the 7th son out of 9 children from Reverend John and Elizabeth Hudson Clay. His father unfortunately passed away when he was young, and his mother then remarried to Captain Henry Watkins. Captain Henry Watkins had several connections that helped Clay further on in life, such as his job with Chancellor George Wythe. Clay worked for Wythe for the next 4 years, after which Wythe later arranged a position for Clay with the Virginia Attorney General Robert Brooke. Wythe entrusted Brooke to finish Clay's legal studies, and after completing his studies, Clay was admitted to the Virginia bar in 1797. Soon after completing the Virginia bar, Clay decided to move to Lexington, Kentucky in November of that same year. Clay desired more clients, more money, and to be closer to his family who lived in Lexington. While in Kentucky, Clay met and married Lucretia Hart, and they married on April 11th of 1799 at Lucretia's parents' home. Shortly after their marriage, Lucretia and Henry moved into the home next door, where they lived for about 7 years before moving to Ashland around 1807. Lucretia and Clay had 11 children, however 8 of them died before she did. Due to his legal prowess, Clay quickly established a solid legal presence and even defended cases with men such as Aaron Burr. After his arrival in Kentucky, Clay put his excellent reputation to use through politics. His political career began specifically in 1803 when he was elected to the Kentucky General Assembly, where he served until 1806. Here, Clay's first legislative initiative was to gerrymander Kentucky's electoral college districts, ensuring that all of Kentucky's presidential electors voted for Thomas Jefferson in the upcoming 1804 presidential election. Another advocation of Clay's was to move the state capital from Frankfort to Lexington. However, this was continually unsuccessful. During this time, Clay began his advocacy for the construction of internal improvements and infrastructure. Clay's success in the Kentucky General Assembly gained him an election in 1806 to the United States Senate. Here, Clay continued his advocacy for infrastructure, including a canal which would connect the Chesapeake Bay and the Delaware River. After only serving in the Senate for 1 year, however, Clay claimed to dislike the rules and instead sought election to the United States House of Representatives. Clay won unopposed in late 1810 and went on to be a U.S. Representative and a Speaker of the House from 1811 to 1814. Towards the end of his first term as a U.S. Representative and Speaker of the House, Clay played a significant part in international relations by serving as a commissioner to the American-British peace negotiations in Ghent, Belgium in 1814. These negotiations ended the War of 1812 between Great Britain and America and was a major part in establishing a healthier relationship between the two countries. Once back in America, Clay resumed his dedication of improving the national state of the government, and during the next years he earned for himself the title of the Great Compromiser. This title was earned over 3 conflicts: the Missouri Compromise, the Compromise Tariff of 1833, and the Compromise of 1850. The Missouri Compromise was an attempt to reconcile between free and slave states, and consisted of 2 parts. First, Missouri would be admitted to the Union as a slave state, but would be balanced out by the admission of Maine, a free state. Second, slavery was to be excluded from all new states in the Louisiana Purchase north of the southern boundary of Missouri. Both sides of the controversy saw the compromise as deeply flawed. However, it was accepted until the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. The Compromise Tariff of 1833 was an attempt to reconcile with South Carolina in the nullification crisis. During this, South Carolina was attempting to secede from the Union, and the Tariff of 1833 guaranteed that all tariff rates above 20% would be reduced by 1/10 every 2 years. Final reductions would be back to 20% by 1842. This tariff forced import tariffs to gradually drop over the next decade, which pleased South Carolina and other southern states threatening to secede that depended on cheap imports from other nations. The Compromise of 1850 consisted of 5 separate bills passed by the United States Congress of September of that year. It diffused a political confrontation between the slave and the free states regarding the status of territories which were acquired in the Mexican-American War, such as Texas and California. This compromise also addressed fugitive slaves and banned slave trade in D.C. Arguably, one of Clay's most influential actions was his American system. This system included policies such as support for a high tariff in order to protect American industries and generate revenue for the federal government, preservation of the Bank of the United States to stabilize the currency and rein in risky state and local banks, and a development of system of internal improvements, such as roads, canals, bridges, etc., which would knit the nation together and be financed by the tariff and the land sales. In regards to slavery, Clay maintained a moderate stance. He saw the institution as immoral, but insisted that it was so entrenched in Southern culture that calls for total abolition were extreme, impractical, and possibly a threat to the integrity of the Union. Clay supported a gradual emancipation policy and helped to fund the American Colonization Society, a society that was made up of mostly Quakers and abolitionists that promoted the return of free black people to Africa, where it was believed that they would have better lives. The organization was supported by many slave owners, such as Clay himself, but who believed that free blacks in America could only lead to slave rebellion. There are many people today who believe that if Clay was president during the Civil War, it would have never happened in the first place. Due to his New Age policies, such as gradual emancipation, and his success with the nullification crisis, many people believe that Clay would have been a very successful president. However, he was never elected. All of Clay's national improvements and his desires for gradual emancipation sparked a desire to be president of the United States. Clay ran in 1824, 1832, and 1844, but lost each time. When Clay was not involved in politics, he was an avid agrarian and a progressive stockman. On Clay's Kentucky estate Ashland, there was 500 acres, which comprised of a smokehouse, greenhouse, barns, and many crops such as corn, wheat, rye, and hemp. Hemp brought in the most cash, and Clay grew thousands of pounds of it. It was mainly used for rope and bagging in the cotton industry. Along with agriculture, Clay also took a strong interest in thoroughbred racing and importation and breeding of livestock such as Arabian horses, Maltese donkeys, and Hereford cattle. Unfortunately, in December 1851, Clay's health was declining due to tuberculosis. Clay resigned from the Senate the following September, but he never recovered from his illness, and on June 29th of 1852, Clay passed away. He died in Washington, D.C. at the age of 75 in his room at the National Hotel. Due to his esteemed legacy, Henry Clay was the very first person to be honored by a funeral ceremony in the Capitol Rotunda.